Hi, welcome to the show. As you can tell, I'm excited today because I've got a great guest, and I think you're really going to enjoy. Not only is he the former sheriff of Yamhill County, but he's also the current McMinnville School District Safety Officer, Jack Crabtree. Jack, thanks so much for being here today.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I came over and chatted with you in your office to learn a little bit more about your new job, and I found a story. It was so interesting talking to you that I think I signed you up that day, and here we are. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's good.
Well, let's back up a little bit to your career as sheriff. Since we only have a few minutes here today, I want you to maybe look back on that career and tell me a little bit about what you learned. Maybe it was about yourself, about people, about the community, about being sheriff. Give us some of your wisdom from this vantage point.
Well, looking back, when I started back in 1985, things weren't really, that's 31 years ago, things weren't really a lot different, I think, than they are now, probably, because I was there and it sort of gradually changed. I don't see a lot of changes. The changes that I actually have realized are actually positive changes. But the things that I learned during that 30 years were so invaluable. Matter of fact, when I was coming up here today, I was coming through an intersection. I had to stop at a stop sign, and an inmate, a former inmate, walked up to my car and kind of, told me what was going on, and so those connections that I've made with not only the successful people in the community, but the ones that have struggled to be successful, and so I've had an opportunity to meet, a lot of different people and learn how people are and what they need to get through life, and but I've had the opportunity. I was blessed with being able to work in our jail, so I spent 2 years, 251 days working as a corrections deputy. After that, I went into patrol as a patrol deputy for a couple of years, and then a detectives for 12 years, and sheriff for 12 years. So I was able to see it all, and I'm very grateful that the people trusted me enough to let me do that for 30 years.
There is a lot of trust. You're our sheriff. You're out there keeping us safe. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that was great. And then, retirement.
So, retirement. You came to the end, you said, okay, that's enough?
I said, 30 years is a pretty good run at it.
That is a good run.
Yeah.
You look like you're ready to start over again. I don't know how you did 30 years as sheriff and you're so youthful.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't always feel youthful, but appreciate the kind thoughts. But no, I did. I still feel really good, and that's really what my goal was, is to, I always looked at my chair there that I sat in that last few years and thought, I want to get out of here alive and go do some more stuff. And
so you retired, and you're thinking about your future. What were some of your thoughts just right after that?
My thoughts really, honestly, right up to I was always committed to not winding down, in my career. I didn't want to wind down before I left. I wanted to be working hard up to the last day, and I thought I'd have to maybe work at that a little bit, to do that in anticipation of retirement. And it was so easy. I worked up to the last day, and then all of a sudden I was done. And I thought, this is going to be interesting. Because I'd worked ever since I was little, and really, every summer and every chance I had, I worked, and I'm appreciative of all those opportunities. And I thought, I want to experience a little time off, just to see what it's like. Not necessarily long term, but just see what it's like. It kind of caught up on some stuff, and wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do, but I've got family that could use some help with some different things, and I've got a farm and stuff. And
so maybe you were looking to do something different.
I actually did commit to myself and my family. Whatever I do is going to be, even though I loved what I did for 30 years, I said that the challenge is going to be to do something not related to public safety.
Okay.
So that was really my only commitment at that point.
Okay, how long did that last?
It lasted until I got a phone call from our superintendent of McMinnville School District, Mary Alice Russell. And we talked, and she explained to me about this opportunity.
McMinnville School District Safety Manager.
Yes. And I thought about it, and I thought it didn't take me very long to realize that there probably wasn't a lot of difference between that job and what I'd been doing, and I wondered about the commitment that I'd made not to do that. And I talked to the superintendent about that a little bit, and she said, well, why don't you, tonight, why don't you sit down and make a list of the reasons why you wouldn't want this job, and then make a list of the reasons that you would. That's no problem. I'm sure I can come up with some reasons why I've justified in my mind to make that commitment to do something different. And I sat down, I was gonna fill in the columns, and I couldn't come up with any reasons why I shouldn't do that job. And so I brought my wife into it, and I said, hey, give me a hand here, I need to make this list. And I said, okay, no problem. And we both sat there, and we couldn't come up with anything. So my mom just happened to come over, and I ran it by her. And she said, well, she says, I don't know, can you think of anything more important than protecting kids at a school?
So your mom posed this question.
Yeah. Well, and the superintendent, in her own way, also posed it. And I thought, I didn't have to think very long on that. I realized that, the 30 years that I was at the sheriff's office, I always had two priorities. And one was protecting our most vulnerable citizens, which were our kids and our elderly. Yeah. And these are kids. And when I realized, where we're at today with school safety and the vulnerability of kids, obviously I couldn't say no to that.
And what just hit me, Jack, is, well, who else are they going to call? You were obviously first on their list, and I bet they probably didn't have anybody else on the list. They probably didn't have another idea. And that might have struck you too, like, there's a need here. And they want somebody qualified, and I'm qualified, and I'm committed. 30 years of experience to bring to this job.
Yeah, I would hope that was a consideration. And it, along with that, I had to ask myself that. I said, the community's made an investment in me for 30 years, and why an
investment?
Yeah, it was an investment for 30 years. I've had extensive training and extensive experience. Why waste that at this point?
Yeah, put that aside, turn away from it, just put it in a box and put it away.
And when I realized that McMinnville School District has 7,000 kids, that's pretty significant. Yeah. And so I said, well, okay, well, here's the deal. Here's my retirement. I go from being responsible for the protection of 100,000 people down to 7,000. How's that? That's a good deal. So the only problem is those 7,000 are pretty concentrated, and in our 9 schools, and it's a privilege to be able to protect them.
So Mary Alice called you when?
Well, actually, she called me. I think it was. I'm not exactly sure when she called me, but she knew I was retiring, and she basically called me, and I said, well, I'll tell you what, if I could think about this a little bit, because I really had planned to take some time off.
Now, she called you during the winter break, right? You would retire. Oh no, when did you retire?
I retired December 31st of 2015, so the day before the new year.
But she called you before you had retired even?
Yes. And I said, well, I'm going to have to think about this. I said, well, when are you thinking, if I do, if I were to take this, when would you want me to start? And she said, right, as soon as you can, right away, and when you can. And I said, well, that's reasonable. I said, let me get back to you, because I actually wanted to take a little time off so I could kind of get caught up on a few things and what have you after 30 years. And she said, well, how much time do you need to do that? And I said, I hadn't really decided and put much thought into that. And she said, well, this was like the end of December. And she said, well, we're on winter break, and kids return on, I don't know if it was the 5th or 6th or what, but the Monday after Labor Day. And
or after New Year's, January 5th?
After New Year's, yes, yes. And she said, would that give you enough time?
She's talking to you when on December 26th, the
Yeah,
day after
yeah.
Christmas,
And,
and she's saying, "Will that be enough time?"
Will that be
January
enough time? And I think,
Uh-huh.
well, it's 5 days. I guess that's reasonable. So sure enough, I was there. Monday morning.
And she gave you, how much time did she give you to think about it? You said, "Oh, let me give you some time."
Yeah, maybe the next day.
She said, "Well, just call me.
Yeah,
Take all the
just
time
let
you
me know
need."
tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I knew her before that, and I really appreciated her, and
Yeah.
I certainly did during that process, and I still do. I sometimes think that it would have been more beneficial to me to have worked for her for a while before I actually went through my career, because she's quite the leader, and she gets things done, and I could have learned a lot from her, and I still do. But
Wonderful.
I always watch her, and I think of the things that I could have learned that would have actually made my career probably better.
Wow, what a testimony.
Yeah, she's great.
That's incredible. Well, now you made the commitment. Yeah, I'm going to show up there right after New Year's. I'm going to walk into this high school. Were you apprehensive at all, or did you have any thoughts of, boy, this is going to be a new experience? You were a little nervous walking into a high school as this is your new job?
Well, I was a little nervous because she said basically, you're gonna create your job. I mean, you're gonna design it. We haven't had it yet, so you're gonna need to create this and from scratch. Which I like to do that. I like to take things that either aren't there or are in a mess and fix them. And so I wasn't overly concerned about that. I think the thing that I was a little concerned about is going into another culture, the school culture.
Yeah.
I ran a sheriff's office and I ran a jail, and we always considered that the jail sort of a city within the city of McMinnville, because it's all self-contained, and it truly is like its own little city. But we'd average, say 140, 150 inmates a day. Now we have a city within the city that's another institution that has, 7,000.
And the high school here were, what, 1,500?
The high school were
2,000.
2,100.
2,100, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a different culture, and then of course I'm thinking, okay, I know part of my responsibilities are going to be to teach and staff, safety stuff.
Yeah.
And I sort of had this flashback of, okay, all of a sudden, like that 30 years or 35 years just closed in, and I was a student in high
You're
school.
back at school.
And now all of a sudden, I'm walking the halls with principals and superintendents and teachers and what have you. And now it's my responsibility to actually be up in front teaching them things.
Yeah.
But I tell you, Ken, what I quickly realized is I was so pleased with how willing they were to learn, something. I wasn't sure how they would embrace, this whole safety concept. I mean, they all understand safety, but they're teachers, so their focus is teaching, and now they're still responsible for teaching, but we have this added layer of responsibility, which is safety. And of course, we know that safety's in all of our responsibilities, and they embraced it. I mean, I think they really appreciate that. So it's been good that way.
Did you walk in maybe with some preconceived ideas about the school system? And did those change?
I did have some preconceived ideas on what I would expect, and they have changed. They changed very quickly. As a detective for the 12 years, I would go in schools quite frequently to interview, victims and sometimes, perpetrators of crimes, but mostly victims. And so I never really got to see, really never looked into the school. I guess you could say that the experiences that I had with the schools countywide were usually on sort of a negative basis, because it was, wasn't really teaching opportunities. It was when something bad had happened.
Yeah.
So now that I come into the schools, I'm expecting, a lot of unruliness and, disorganization and just things that just sort of I wasn't sure that I'd be comfortable with or I could adjust to. It was the opposite. You go to your elementary schools and you see the little guys and girls walking in single file lines and marching just like absolutely the way they very mannerly and everything is organized and actually true all the way up and through the high school. They're not marching and they're not quite that controlled, but good kids. Through this district, there again, I can only speak for this district right now, but this district has some unbelievable kids. It is amazing.
You were pleasantly surprised.
Yes, I was.
Wow.
Teaching staff and all the staff are much better than I had expected, and the kids are just amazing. When you have 7,000 kids and you have the few incidents that we actually have, it's pretty amazing. In the mornings when I see 2,100 kids file through 2 doors, a single point entry, it's and seeing how smooth that goes, it just amazes me.
Well, that's fascinating. Single point entry at the high school.
Yes.
That's for a purpose. Tell us about that.
Our goal is to have single point entries at all of our schools, and we do. And those single point entries are tightly controlled, through video surveillance and access control through electronic locking devices and what have you. And we don't want kids coming in, from all directions.
Because unidentified people aren't supposed to be there, could be doing that.
Yes.
And I've walked into the school, I think, to come visit you, and as soon as I walked through that door, they knew that I didn't belong there, because they didn't know me.
Right.
And they're just right there, sir, right through to this office right
Yes.
here. There was no getting past. There was a large person standing there at that door,
Yeah.
basically guarding.
Yeah.
And that's been my experience. Or I've gone up to an elementary school, and the door's locked. And you buzz, they see you on the camera, they let you in. There's no just walking into school.
Right. And matter of fact, that door that you came through, if it seemed like it was unlocked, it wasn't. She unlocked it. She would have unlocked it for you.
Yeah.
And she sees you and realizes that you should be let in. And then at that point, she knows I'm there, and you come in. And if you'd have gone further into the facilities, you would have been checked out further. You would have signed in and given a badge and so on and so
Yeah,
forth. So
that's exactly what
it's good security. It's kids are. When I first started there, you'd see kids letting strangers in, because it'd be raining, and somebody come up to a door and that school is huge. I mean,
Yes.
it takes up a lot of footprint
Yeah.
of the grounds, and somebody comes up and the kids would let them in. We teach our kids to be polite and
Helpful.
and they were. But I have to say, I've seen it now. I saw 2 kids standing at a door not too long ago, and they were sort of like, "Hey, we need in," and on the side door, and there was glass, so they were visible, and they didn't look suspicious or anything, and there was probably 100 kids right inside that glass, and not a one of them would let them in.
Uh-huh.
And I thought,
You got to go in that single point entry.
Yes.
That's the rule.
so they're learning, and they're adjusting to it, and it makes for safer schools, because if you do have a violent intruder, you don't want to just have them access the school.
Let's go with that. Violent intruder. We're concerned about that. It's been in the news. It's happening more often. I think people watching today want to hear about what you've done to help prepare our schools for that possibility. You've trained teachers. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. We have historically the schools practice drills. We practiced drills when we were in school. Fire alarm. What do we do? And some earthquake drills. Of course, now with the big earthquake that looms out there, that's a few years overdue. We're really more intent on training for earthquake issues. But and then we added, of course, we got the active shooters and the violent intruders coming into our schools. So now we've added that as well, and that we call lockdown drills.
Okay.
And historically, before I had started, they were doing those drills, but the drills basically consisted of, basically taking your students in the classroom, locking the doors, lights out, and then being quiet, and then something would come over the intercom and say the drill's over, and and that was the extent of it.
Okay.
Well, the problem with that's a good exercise, that's a good drill, and I'm glad they've done it. The problem is what we said is we need more options because, and I didn't create this, has been out there, we call it the run, hide, fight. It's endorsed.
Run, hide, fight.
Run, hide, fight. It's not necessarily linear in progression. It's
Okay.
just those
Three options.
three options. So you could, start off in a running situation. It doesn't have to be, like I say, linear in progression, so it doesn't have to be
Okay.
run.
Any of those
and hide
options
and fight.
right now
Exactly.
could happen.
But what I realized is that said, we've got to do something different than we've been doing because we're not giving students and staff any options. If the hide part's not working, they don't know what to do.
Yeah, okay.
And if you end up in a crisis, you revert back to muscle memory, and you better have some training to fall back on, right? So we said, well, let's give some options. Well, this run, hide, fight is really endorsed by the Department of Education as well as Department of Homeland Security, because unfortunately or fortunately, they've had enough cases of this now. They've been able to look back and say, we gotta do something different. And hiding is not necessarily the best option. It may be, but we've seen schools where that option, used only as that option, resulted in people dying. So
tell us about run.
okay, so you have run. So you have the hide, which has been practiced. Now what we're saying is, okay, that may be your option, but you know what? If something's going on down at the other end of the school, and you know your surroundings as the teacher, and you've already thought through this, and you know a good path of exiting that school, we want you to do it. Because we think that there's times where it's better not to be there.
Yeah.
And so that's just something to consider. And so we show them techniques on, okay, pre-plan this thing. If you're going to take your students and you're going to run, where are you going to run? How are you going to run? Are you going to utilize window exits, doors? What's your cover, available cover, and that type of thing? At the same time, in the school setting, we have this doctrine in loco parentis, which is that Latin term for in place of a parent. So these teachers have,
Give us that Latin again.
in loco parentis,
In local parentis.
yeah, it's a Latin term for
Okay.
basically in place of a parent.
All right.
So the training that I've had prior to the school, working at the school, there was no in loco parentis issues. It was basically, if you can help somebody, great. If you can't, go. That's the way businesses would be taught.
Okay.
In the school environment, that's not the way it works.
Uh-huh.
We're responsible for our kids. We're not going to leave them behind. And so we don't teach that. We don't teach, give them an option, and if they, sort of the survival of the fittest, that's not what we do. If we run, we take them all.
I see.
If we can't take them all, we don't run.
Wow.
So we talk about that. That's sort of the run part. And then there's a lot more to it than that, but that's the run part. And then we talk about, okay, if you decide to hide, in other words, go to your classrooms and hide, we also added some options for barricading, keeping, giving yourself some time and distance between your kids and the shooter. So we talk about barricading techniques. And then we talk about, okay, so running wasn't an option, hiding is a good option, but the door comes open.
Okay.
What are you going to do? Well, there wasn't any training on that. The training was basically you just sit there and hope for the best, which is not what I want them to do.
Yeah.
So the fighting option, albeit a last resort, if a teacher or even students feel that their life is they're in imminent risk of serious physical injury or death, or a third party is, we don't want you to lay there and take it. So we teach them techniques on how can you distract and overtake a person who's trying to kill you.
Wow.
Now that's pretty intense.
And you're teaching that.
Yes.
You've taught that several times.
I've taught that to, like I say, I think there's about 650 to 700 staff at the school district. I believe we've got at least 90% of them covered. And we've also taught all of our freshmen at the high school, and we've taught our middle schools. And we want to roll that out to as many more people as we can, but we have got at least 90% of our staff. And of course, they're the leaders in an incident.
Now, some of these classes have gotten, it's pretty intense, like you say. It seems like you had told me about a particular incident where you were training a teacher and you got surprised by their response. Tell us about that one.
I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, what happened?
When I first started this, I really, you talk about apprehensive, being a little bit nervous about, this subject and what I was trying to teach, a different culture of people. I wasn't sure how they were going to embrace this, because they're teachers. I was in law enforcement. We were taught to fight. And defend ourselves and other people. That's what we did, and that's what you do in law enforcement. Teachers aren't taught that, so I wasn't sure how well that would be taken. But they all did great. It was just unbelievable. I wish they were all videotaped because they were just unbelievable students. But I had this one teacher that I go into sort of the textbook part of it before we do practical exercises and discussion about what to expect and what have you. And there was one teacher that I wasn't sure, and reading her body language during that portion of it, I wasn't sure if where she was at with it. I really truly wasn't.
Resistant, on board, confused?
Exactly, all above. And so I asked for 2 volunteers, and I picked her and another guy, which kind of took it out of the volunteer realm, but nevertheless, I called them volunteers. And I thought, this will tell me where she's at, because I really couldn't, I wasn't following her too well. So I picked her, and she said, yeah, I'll do it. And the first exercise we did was where an intruder came through the door that was even barricaded, and she absolutely amazed me and everybody in that room. We usually have like 35 people in each class, and she literally, and I wasn't sure if she was going to freeze up or do nothing or what. And when that intruder came through that door, in one fell swoop, without exaggeration, she was airborne, and she had taken that person's Nerf gun that we use. It's a safe toy gun. It was a rifle, and she, in one fell swoop, through the air, had removed that rifle instantly from that intruder's hands. And the actor that I had doing is one of my safety officers, and he didn't want to give it up. He wasn't just going easy. And she had that out of his hand, like in an instant. And before we could cheer, because I think the whole room wanted to cheer this, because in a real situation, she would have been just as successful. I really believe that. And before we had a chance to cheer, she not only had that rifle out of his hand, but then she
Let him have it.
She let him have it. Now, this is after I told everybody 5 times, and I always do it at least 5 times. Do not hurt this man. He's our friend. This is just an exercise. But they're incredible. And I will tell you, they're going to protect those kids. They just need that training, and they need the approval to do it. And the superintendent has given it.
Yes.
And it's really counterintuitive, because we're always taught, don't get involved, let the police handle it.
Yeah.
And that's what we're always taught. We've always been taught that. Well, with this new age that we have with school shooters, the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security and the other experts in the field are basically saying, if you don't get involved, people are going to die. So you have to get involved now. We're telling you, even though, like I said, it's counterintuitive, we have to teach our staff and students appropriate measures in situations like that. And the fact is, the statistics are that the incident will be over before the police arrive, so we have to get involved. And the schools are embracing it.
Well, Jack, that is powerful. Get involved. And I'm glad you're the man that's there teaching that and the success that you're having. I think the people who have watched today are amazed at the progress that we've made in this situation with our teachers and our school safety. So thank you for being here. It's all the time we have. I know we could go on.
Yeah.
We're done. That go fast?
It went fast. Yeah, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it.